meeting. My name is Mary Sharp. I will be serving as your chairperson today. We will begin this morning's meeting with a roll call. Mr. Whitehead, would you proceed, please?
Mr. Gill,
Here.
Dr. Pritchard,
Here.
Mr. Tolles,
Here.
Vice Chair Lyles Wallace,
Here.
Ms. O'Connell, Ms. Wilbanks,
Here.
Chairman Sharp.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Whitehead. I would like to remind you that copies of today's agenda are located at the back of the room if you need them. If you wish to be a speaker on any case that is on today's agenda, please fill out an attendant speaker's card. Once you have filled out the card, please bring it up front and hand it to one of our OPD staff members located in the front of the chamber. When the agenda item is called, you will be given an opportunity to speak. At this point, I would like to read our conflict of interest. The adopted policy of the Land Use Control Board requires that any member of the board recuse himself or herself from any participation in the discussion or voting on any matter on the meeting's agenda in which he or she may have direct or indirect personal interest. The member shall vacate his or her seat during deliberation on any matter from which they have recused themselves. An abstention may substitute for a recusal for the purposes of maintaining a quorum. I would now like to get approval of our minutes from the last board meeting. May I have a motion?
Ms. Sharp,
Yes.
with the second or third time, we have mentioned that on page 2, under General Order of Public Hearing, we have had the last sentence. She then introduced Committee Chair Gil Brown to read the consent agenda items. Ms. Wilbanks has been here for many meetings. She's only missed one in years. It should be Lisa Wilbanks.
Okay. Well, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Whitehead, do you have a secretary's report?
No, ma'am.
Okay, would you explain today's procedures?
Yes, ma'am. At the beginning of today's meeting, we will establish a consent agenda for those items where no one in the audience or on the board is requesting an individual public hearing for that matter. After the consent agenda is established and approved, we will move on to the regular agenda. For each case on the regular agenda, OPD staff will give a staff presentation. This will be followed by the applicant's presentation and any testimony from others who support the application. The applicant and supporters will be given a total of 10 minutes. Following each speaker, the chair will ask the board members if they have any questions of that speaker. Next, the opposition will be given a total of 10 minutes to present their case. Again, following each speaker, the chair will ask the board members if they have any questions of that speaker. Finally, the applicant will have a 3-minute rebuttal period under the same rules. Following all the presentations and after all the parties have been heard, the board will ask one final time if any member has any additional questions of people who spoke. Then the chair will close the public hearing portion of the case, entertain a motion on the matter, discuss, and then vote on the application. If an applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing portion of the case, or if a board member wishes to hear any additional testimony, a 2/3 affirmative vote will be required, and at that point we will hear both sides and give both sides equal amount to provide additional testimony. The speaker's cards are again at the front podium to your left, and we do not need speaker's cards from the applicant since their names are already part of the record. With that, Madam Chair, that's our procedure.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any announcements? Do we need to recognize any big visitors,
I don't
dignitaries?
think so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whitehead. The Land Use Control Board is a supporter of community involvement, and we welcome neighborhood comments and feedback. We are respectful of the fact that many of you have taken off work or adjusted your schedules to be here today, but we ask that your comments be made within the time frame allowed. If there are multiple speakers, please try not to be repetitive with your side's limited time. Lastly, I'd like to ask you to silence your cell phones so as not to interrupt or disturb anyone during today's proceedings. With our proceedings being explained, I would like to introduce to my right Ms. Lisa Wilbanks, who will be this morning's consent agenda chairperson. Ms. Wilbanks will read those items that are between 1 and 6, which we're going to place on the consent agenda. Once the consent agenda is read, if you wish to discuss one of these items individually, please come forward and give us the item number, and we will pull that case. We will then vote on the remaining consent agenda items as one vote, and following the vote, we will hear the cases that were pulled individually. Ms. Wilbanks, would you proceed, please?
Yes, ma'am. Item number 1, case S19-26 in East Memphis. The request is a 19-lot residential subdivision on the south side of Wilburn and the north side of Princeton, approximately 900 to 1,000 feet east of Mendenhall. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 2, case S20-02 in the Sea Yorkshire Forest. Request is a 2-lot subdivision at 5374 Sea Isle. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions while replacing the proposed condition with a new condition, which Mr. Josh Whitehead will further explain.
Thank you. Since the restrictive covenants instrument has been recorded earlier this week, the condition can now state, quote, "The following note shall be placed on the final plat, see instrument number 200154155 for restrictive covenants," unquote.
Item number 3, case SAC 20-1 in Bunton. The request is the closure of Terrell Place north of Southern Avenue. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 4, case Z2876 in Raleigh. The request is a modification of a general plan at 3545 Austin P. Highway to reduce the minimum front setback and increase the permitted number and area of detached signs. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item number 6, case SUP 19-41 in Glenview. The request is a cell tower at 1883 Lamar. Staff recommendation is hold for 1 month.
Thank you, Ms. Wilbanks. Anyone now wishing to pull a case from the consent agenda, please come forward and give us the item number.
Yes.
Good morning.
It's not.
Okay. So, the items on the consent agenda will now be voted on with one vote, subject to the recommendations of OPD. If the consent agenda is approved, only items number 5 will have full independent public hearings. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to show, the record to show that I recused myself from agenda item number 2.
Okay.
Dr.
Thank you.
Pritchard, can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
You can abstain. If you recuse, we're going to have to roll that. Never mind. We now have a quorum. Recusals removed from a quorum, but now we have 7 members even with that recusal. Excuse me.
Ready for me?
Okay, can I get a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, move to approve item number 1, case S19-26. Item number 2, case S20-02 is amended. Item number 3, case SAC 20-1. Item number 4, case Z2876. And item number 6, case SUP 19-41.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm now going to go to Dr. Pritchard for the regular agenda. Dr. Pritchard calls the item number and the case number.
Agenda item number 5, PD 99-362, Balmoral, a major modification to allow a 3-story building for office development at the southwest corner of Quince and Linfield Road. Staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
Is the applicant present? Yes. Is there any opposition? There's opposition. I'll say, okay, we'll hear the case.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the Land Use Control Board, and those who are present. This is a planned development in the Belmore neighborhood. As Mr. Whitehead explained to you earlier, this item was filed in December, I believe, and pulled from the agenda to file a major modification to this planned development to allow a 3-story hotel at the southwest corner of Quince and Linfield Road. This modification is to allow a 3-story office building with associated accessory uses within the outline plan. The planning area, as stated on the graphic, the subject property is at the east end of I-240 loop. It is in the Belmore Residence Association's neighborhood. Also, the adjacent neighborhood to the northwest is Sea Park Neighborhood Association. This application was forwarded to those neighborhood associations for review and comment. The city and ownership map, we mailed out notices to adjacent property owners in the area. We mailed out these notices on time, and they were scheduled to be heard today. The applicant also posted the required notification sign on the property. The zoning of this site, as you see on the graphic, it was originally R10 residential development. In 2000, or December of 1999, a planned development was approved by the Memphis City Council in February of 2000 for a 3-story office building, which limited the maximum height as well as the net square feet of floor area. As you can see by the graphic, it is adjacent to the residential neighborhood to the south, as well as office and park, Lichterman Nature Center to the northeast. The land use clearly reveals that this property is on the edge of a significant residential, single-family home residential developments. It is also across from Lichterman Nature Center, as well as office buildings along Linfield Office Park, but separated from commercial uses to the northwest from the neighborhood retail center. This is a graphic that kind of gives you the layout of the existing conditions of the property. As you can see, the eastern edge of this property that's immediately adjacent to the intersection is heavily wooded with mature trees. As you can see to the west, approximately where the arrow is pointed, this is there's a major transmission easement. You can see those transmission towers on the property. This area remains clear by the utility to maintain that distribution easement. The Quince Linfield plan was approved in February 15th of 2000 by the Memphis City Council. During that meeting, the applicant and the neighborhood agreed to a maximum height of 2 stories and a net gross floor area for a commercial office building. This is the original concept plan that was approved. As you can see, the building was in the eastern portion of the property, as well as parking to the west. The site plan is primarily the same as far as building location. However, orientation may be different. Size of the building may be different. And then there are other encumbrances on the site that have to be dealt with, including the overhead transmission easement. This is the applicant's concept plan that has not changed since they filed the application. As you can see, they have a major primary access off from Quince Road, a secondary access from Linfield Road to the east. There's no access to Vassar Drive to the south. The building is situated on that portion of the lot that's farthest away from single family, and by design, they could not locate the building under the easement. So they are maximizing the property to locate the building on that site to front the Linfield Road side, as well as it's really a double frontage building to also front the parking lot. The interior of the site will have a landscaping in accordance with the zoning code, as well as a walking path the applicant's providing. There will also be a tenant for a coffee shop and a small restaurant. These are neighborhood uses that are compatible to the office development. This is a 100% masonry building, concrete masonry unit and brick veneer. It is a commercial style building, architecture style building. As you can see on the lower floors, you have the Linfield Coffee Shop and a restaurant with outdoor seating, as well as the remaining of the building will be office on the second and third stories. This is the view from the intersection. This will a vision of how the building will look from the immediate intersection of Linfield and Quince Road. And in conclusion, as I stated earlier, it was located in R10, but it was approved for planned development with mature trees and buffer along Linfield with the public road frontage on Vassar. This property is limited in buildable area due to the major transmission easement, and the applicant is requesting a modification to the outline plan to allow the 3 stories with a maximum gross floor area of where a maximum of 2 stories was permitted with a maximum gross floor area of 45,000 square feet. This new building will be a 3-story building, which will provide office space in an area in need of sustainable office development within the city limits, with neighborhood amenities for small restaurant, coffee shop, and walking paths in close proximity to the Bearmore residential community. This plan was routed to our Memphis 3.0 section. Based on the information and the proposed land use, the proposal is consistent with and supports the goals of the Memphis 3.0 comprehensive plan. We're recommending approval with conditions. Those conditions are attached in your staff report. And if you would like to address any of those, I'd be happy to do that. We received several letters of opposition. We also received letters of support. So it's the balance of weighing of one versus the other. I couldn't tell. However, we do have opposition, and the opposition is present. We did receive some phone calls on the application as well. Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Bacchus.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, we're ready to hear the applicant first, and then we'll hear the opposition.
Yes, ma'am. Cindy Reeves, SR Consulting, 5909 Shelby Oaks Drive, Suite 200. I want to thank staff for working with us. I had passed out a legal opinion from Ferris Babango Brannon back in January of 2009 to Mr. John Ellis, who was the previous owner of the property. Mr. Ellis did end up getting ill shortly after that, and then passed away shortly after that. But we feel that this opinion is still valid. The plan development never had a time extension on it. We're now filing for the major modification to allow it to have a time extension. It will have a 5-year time extension from the approval date. If this gets approved, it will be from 5 years from now that he will have to, in order to file his final plans. My client has done a lot of homework as far as trying to get something extremely nice. The purpose of going up to 3 stories was to have a smaller footprint and less square footage. So it doesn't take up as much room on the bottom floor as what a 2-story building would do. His maximum square footage or gross square footage would be 38,000 square feet versus what was previously approved at 45.5. And we felt that that was a good compromise. We feel we've got a good design, and we just wanted the flexibility to be able to go up to 3 stories. If it's the will of the board to keep the PD like it was previously approved, then, you know, that is up for discussion. We just thought this was a better plan by giving a smaller footprint, which gave more area for landscaping and parking, and felt that we could get more buffering that way. We have worked with the neighborhood, and we just would appreciate the board's consideration of approving this time extension for a PD that does not have an expiration date. And we'd like to hear from the opposition again.
Okay.
We did have a neighborhood meeting, and it was very well attended. and it was very mixed, just like sort of your letters are. Some people were in support and some people were against.
Do we have any questions of the applicant at this time? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to hear from the opposition. I have several cards. So if you'd come up and. Yes, well, do we have a table? I'm just, okay. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Jeffrey Land. My wife Genevieve Land and I live at 2262 Lovett Drive, which is in the Balmoral neighborhood. We're
Okay.
recent residents to the neighborhood as of June 2019. I'd like to first thank the members for their service. I know it's a volunteer board and this is an important contribution to our community. I'd like to make 2 notes as to the opposition. In the staff report, there were 8 total letters, 6 opposed, 2 proponents of this development. Ms. Reeves mentioned the Ferris Babango letter, which is an opinion as to the legal status of this PD. It's not adjudicated. It's simply a lawyer was paid to write a letter. Full disclosure, Genevieve and I are both attorneys. We work in the same office. I'm a lifelong Memphian. So with that, I'd like to introduce just by number. We have 7 members of our neighborhood here today in opposition. I'm not aware of any of the neighbors that are in support of this PD. Many of these neighbors behind us have lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. I'd like to reserve 4 of the minutes to be split between Phil Cox and Eddie Settles, 2 minutes each. So I anticipate my remarks will only take 6 minutes to read. So good morning. My name is Jeffrey Land. My wife Genevieve and I live in the Balmoral neighborhood, as I said, at 2262 Lovett Drive. She and I were elected by the members of the Neighborhood Association in January's meeting by 23 to 3, so 26 members, paid members of our Neighborhood Association, to oppose this plan development. We submitted to the Office of Planning and Development a detailed letter of opposition, which is attached to the staff report, and it goes into greater detail of Balmoral's opposition to this plan development. It was touched on the prior history of this initial filing in 1999. So in 2000, after vigorous negotiation, the neighborhood reached an agreement to have a 2-story building with no windows on Vassar Drive and increased, foliage to reduce auditory and visual, intrusion into the community. Since it is the position of the Office of Planning and Development that the PD is still in force, then logically that agreement is in force. It is a 2-way street, not a 1-way street. However, it is our position that the PD has lapsed. It was never recorded with the Register of Deeds. There was no notice to subsequent purchasers as ourselves in this neighborhood that such a plan development was in effect. This argument again is set forth in greater detail in our letter attached to the staff report. As such, this agreement should be honored by the current applicant and the Office of Planning and Development. At that time, the LUCB and the City Council approved a 2-story office building and also required the no windows on Vassar Drive. There are 2 residences on Vassar. 3 stories is going to easily allow them to see into the backyard and intrude upon the privacy of those citizens. At a minimum, if this project is allowed to go forward, then the architecture should be in keeping with the neighborhood and thus should appear more residential. 2 examples, Gould's corporate headquarters at White Station and Poplar. It appears to be just a large mansion. It appears to be a residence. Again, at Ridge Bend Road and the Ridgeway Loop area, Benchmark Capital and many other businesses just appear to be residences. This architecture, as proposed, is commercial and it just does not fit with our neighborhood. This plan is not house scale. It is argued in the staff report that it complies with 3.0 as its house scale. Our home is 1,600 square feet. The reduced size of 38,500 square feet is not house scale. 200 parking spaces is not house scale. it is a sea of pavement. And when you look at that overhead view, that demonstrates the largeness of the parking space. As noted repeatedly in the staff report, this lot is heavily encumbered by a major TVA easement, which overall makes this an unattractive development, which our fear overall is vacancies, and I'm about to touch on that. I mean, imagine driving into this parking lot bisecting two large TVA easements. Just as an initial thought, that is unattractive to me. So as to the need for office space, that might have been true in 1999. As 20 years has progressed, up and down Linfield, there are leasing signs for office space available, many by the applicant's firm Colliers. In addition, where Pinnacle, Pfizer, and SunTrust now have large office spaces along Shady Grove at Poplar Avenue, those buildings did not exist in 1999. Neither likely did the Triad Center. If you drive around this area, they're all advertising office space, commercial office space. At Primacy Parkway and Ridgeway Boulevard, 60,000 square feet advertised. And the other I mentioned, up and down Linfield, the Ridgeway Loop area. The request seeking approval to permit an office building is not compliant with Memphis 3.0 and does not support the goals and objectives of the current land use, as this building will not act as a buffer space in between high-intensity commercial space and residential space. In fact, the project will be damaging intrusion and not a buffer. The neighborhood has concerns about flooding. This PD is at the top end of our neighborhood. It's at the ridge. Everything flows down. If we have less foliage, less ground cover, we need to have a significant drainage plan in place. I have not been privy to such plan. Another concern is traffic. That is at a corner lot where it's one of 3 ingresses and egresses into our neighborhood. There is a stoplight there, but there's a protected turn through a yield sign. It's essentially a blind turn at this point. If you have an entrance exit off of Linfield, we have to seriously consider how these people are going to be entering and exiting that building when people are coming in all 4 directions. That is a serious concern. There are no sidewalks in that part of the neighborhood. It's an interesting neighborhood in the fact that there's a sidewalk all the way up and down Lovett. There are no sidewalks up and down Vassar. So we'd have to accommodate pedestrians somehow. Certainly, increase in traffic is going to be problematic and dangerous for our pedestrians. Many people walk their dogs, ride their bikes with their children, ride their, bikes themselves. So traffic is a concern. A minor concern that we consider is where are the dumpsters for this 38,000 square foot building going to be? That's going to produce a lot of trash. I would hope it would at least be as close to the interstate as possible. We would require substantial vegetative boundary plantings as discussed. There is plans for that, but we want that to be increased as much as possible to limit the auditory and visual intrusion to the neighborhood. And lastly, I'll close with the building of now I've learned, a 38,000 square foot office space will impact our neighborhood for decades to come. Our neighborhood is concerned that if this development is unsuccessful, then we will be saddled with an unoccupied building that will become blight in the future, which will act to negatively impact our home values. This applicant has not shown a need for additional office space in this area, when in fact residential space is needed and how it is currently zoned. At the December neighborhood meeting, which we appreciate the applicant having us, he admitted that he has done no market research and no market analysis and has no anchor tenants. This is a speculative building which he builds and hopes people will occupy it. That should be alarming. We have a glut of office space in this part of the neighborhood. It's a central part of our community, and this is just unneeded at the time. 20 years ago, I'd have a harder argument. I think today there's sufficient office space in this neighborhood, and I thank the members for their time. I will yield to Mr. Cox or Settles if they feel they need to add to our remarks.
Okay, before we do so, do we have any questions of Mr. Land? Any questions of Mr. Land? Okay, would the next opposition person please come up? Give us your name and address.
I don't know, I guess I'll just stand if that's okay.
Okay, name and address.
My name is Philip Cox. I live at 6011 Southampton Drive. That's not a direction, it's all one word. You try to mail me something and you abbreviate it, I won't get it. I've been a resident of the Balmoral Neighborhood Association for about 35 years. I was president of the Neighborhood Association for about 25 years. And I was president during the time when the initial application for this to be made an office property was made. There has been an inference along the way that the neighborhood had not opposed this particular proposal, and that is not the case. We opposed it back then. But when we heard the pulse or felt the pulse of the city council and the land use control board about what they were going to allow this property to be, we began a negotiation process with the then proposed developer, who we were able to negotiate we knew we were going to lose. So at that point, we went into the best haggling that we could get for the neighborhood, but we were opposed. Now, one of the concessions that we were able to negotiate was that on the south side of the property, closest to the neighborhood residential houses that are in existence, that the building not have any windows on the south side to maintain those neighbors' privacy. Those two houses that are immediately south of the proposed location are probably the only houses I know of in the neighborhood that have 8-foot privacy fences. This particular property where they are proposing to build is slightly elevated above those houses. These people like their privacy. One of the guys at that time was a beekeeper. I think he probably had a hobby beekeeper, not selling commercial honey, but he wanted to make sure that the kids couldn't get in to his beehives. And the other house has a pool, and they wanted the privacy for their family if they go swimming nudie in the back, I guess, I don't know. But they wanted their privacy. And none of this is really, it's still germane to this issue. People like their privacy. And to have this new developer come in with a with a 3-story building, that just puts all of those folks peering into their backyards. It invades their privacy. And to Ms. Shark's point a while ago, thanking these folks who have come because they've taken time out of their busy schedule. And I want to reinforce, we're a small neighborhood, but as Jeff alluded a while ago, at a neighborhood association meeting where we had 26 people in attendance, 23 of those opposed this. So if you look at this at the big picture of things, when you have 26 people come to a neighborhood meeting, okay, they got busy lives. But to take time to come to a neighborhood association meeting, they were serious about their opposition, and it was voted 23-3 opposed to this. So I think that speaks volumes.
Okay.
And last but not least, that was a pretty building, a pretty picture, and it had a nice scene of a restaurant. But he doesn't have a tenant for that restaurant. This is pie in the sky. I'm a sales guy, okay? That's sales talk if I've ever heard it, but a picture of it, okay? So with all due respect, I don't think he has, or at least he told us he didn't have any tenants, any named tenants. This is speculative office in an already saturated market that's oversaturated with vacant properties. So I promise not to take very long, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Cox? Any of the board members have any questions for Mr. Cox before we go on to Mr. Settles? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Settles, you have a couple of minutes. We're letting you go over because we got a little time here, but,
I appreciate it.
okay.
My name's Eddie Settles, and my wife and I live at 5861 Vassar Drive. My wife's family moved there in 1964. This is 1,100 families in East Memphis that is one of the most racially diverse, middle-class, middle-income communities left in Memphis. Mayor Strickland in 2015, when he ran for election, if y'all heard him speak, repeatedly said that one of the major problems he faced was that the city of Memphis, to use his words, hemorrhage middle-income people. Our neighborhood has been the subject of 17 Land Use Control Board or predecessor decisions about land use over the last 50 years. We have lost all but 2 of them. This land use is a dagger at the heart of this community. If you approve this matter, for the very first time, the land use will have been granted to put a commercial facility inside the boundaries of R10 for Balmoral. Ms. Land and her husband, Jeffrey, moved here without any knowledge or any way to know that this project had been approved. It was not on the public record anywhere. No one could find it. It was only discovered the day the public hearing was given. You have the power to revoke it. You should. But in any event, if you approve this, you are essentially saying to Balmoral and to the city of Memphis that the mayor's concerns are irrelevant. I beg you, do not approve this major modification. And I would suggest on your own motion, you should use your authority under 9.6 of the Unified Development Code to revoke this 20-year-old hidden ordinance and make the applicant go back to the beginning and do what it should have done and what it started to do before it discovered this opinion from Mr. Brannon that had been hidden for 10 years and was not sent to the Office of Planning and Development. It was sent originally to the owner who has since deceased. I beg you not to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any questions? Board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Settles? Hearing none, we'll call back the applicant to finish your 10 minutes and make your rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the 3 stories is an issue, what we would like to do is go ahead and go with the original PD approval under section 9.6.14A2, which is outline plans with no expiration date. Any plan development that was approved prior to the effective date of this text amendment, February 10th, 2015, without an expiration clause in its outline plan conditions shall require a major modification if no final plan is recorded with the Register of Deeds. Such major modification shall require notice to all property owners within 500 feet. And what we would like the board to do today is to just reactive or to approve this under section 9.6.14A2 and allow this plan development to start its 5-year time extension or time limit. My client will not be building this building without a tenant. I mean, as you know, Mr. Gill, you don't build a building with absolutely no tenants there. So he will have a tenant within the next 5 years and will abide by all the existing conditions that were previously approved and worked with the neighborhood on.
Can I ask the applicant some questions?
Yes,
Mayor,
name and address for the record.
Chairman Shar.
Yes, are you finished? Are you through? Okay, you can,
Will
okay. Go ahead. Mr. Gill.
Sure.
Preston, address and phone number.
So I have to say my name?
Name and address.
Preston Thomas or Linfield Center 1 LLC. Phone number 901
No, just address.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6363 Poplar Avenue, Suite 2020, Memphis, Tennessee 38119.
Are you representing the developer in this case, or are you the developer?
I have purchased a lot. I'm the developer.
I got you. And you've closed on it?
Yes.
Okay. In this particular case, I completely disagree with the neighborhood. I think, and I've known Mr. Settles for a long time, and I grew up around the corner from this site. I think y'all are lucky to have such a beautiful building be proposed for this site. I know the architect, Christopher Speltz, probably drew this for Renaissance. Residential buildings, buildings that are designed residentially for commercial use don't hold their value. And this building, and the way it's sited, when it's occupied, will hold its value and will actually increase the values of your neighborhood's residential single-family lots. I know that y'all don't see it that way now, but this is a great site for this use, in my opinion. I agree, building a spec building, we have a lot of Class B office space on the market, so I don't disagree with you about that, especially down Linfield. Some of that has to do with the age of those buildings on Linfield. I disagree with the comment earlier about Triad. Triad 3 was built over the last about 10 years ago, but Triad 1 and 2 have been there for a long time, 30 plus years. Commercial buildings of this style hold their value. And I love that, I think that the way it's cited, I would hate to see you remove that third story, increase the footprint, when I think you've been very considerate about the walking path and locating the parking underneath the power lines. So I understand the neighborhood's concerns, but in this particular case, this is a great site for this use, and I think you're lucky to have such a beautiful building be proposed for it. I think we've seen plenty of C-stores and other uses come through that I agree with the neighbors detract from property values. In this particular case, I just, it's hard not to support such a beautiful building on a great site.
Okay, thank you. Applicant, were you finished with your presentation yet?
The main thing was that it's not a spec building. He will have a tenant, and we would just like the opportunity to do something really wonderful for this corner. It will be a Class A office building, which I feel that the neighbors will be very proud to have in their neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions of either the applicant or the opposition at this time?
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. You mentioned going back to a two-story. Are we dealing with a two-story building at this point or a three-story?
We would prefer the three-story. We would prefer to do what we had planned on doing. It reduces the bottom floor footprint, and it also reduces the square footage.
Okay.
We would just like that. You know, we feel that that's a better plan by reducing that footprint, the bottom footprint. And it allows the additional amenities of, you know, a coffee shop or a restaurant or something like that on that bottom floor as an amenity to the office building. So it's the will of the board. If y'all want to go with the original approval, or if you want to go with the original approval but allow them the flexibility to go up to 3.
Thank you.
Do we need to get an amendment on that, or we just?
I think if I can put Ms. Reeves' comment into parliamentary language, if the original motion, which is for the request before you, fails, I think Ms. Reeves is asking that there be a second motion for the original approval, and if that fails, then we're back to an expired PD. So you'd have motion number 1 as requested. If it fails, we'll have a second motion for the original approval. If it fails, then we are with a residential zone property. I think that is that is what she's saying. That is how you can effectuate her request.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Just for the record, I heard a bunch of
to the opposition, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody being here. And, Colliers, I've been working for this firm, the history of our firm, the founders, Bob Snowden and Russell Wilkinson, they were some of the first residential, commercial, and industrial developers. They started building the first industrial warehouses in southeast Memphis with the Boyle family. So the history of our firm is bringing jobs and product to the market and opportunities for companies to locate here. So I feel blessed that I can have the opportunity to bring good paying jobs, companies, amenities to this neighborhood. And my intent is to help the city of Memphis and help this neighborhood. I have no intent of hurting this neighborhood in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of all I wanted to say for the record.
Okay, this will close the public portion of our meeting. Dr. Pritchard, if you would make a motion as stated in this item number 5, and then we'll move on from there.
Move approval of agenda item number 5, case number PD 99-362.
Second.
Okay. We had a motion, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion? No discussion? I assume we're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Is there anything else, Mr. Whitehead, before we close this meeting?
No, ma'am.
Okay. With that being said, meeting adjourned.